What holds so many people back is not actually making mistakes. It's really the fear of making mistakes. And there's only one way to make sure that you never make a mistake, and that's to do nothing at all. But to do nothing at all would be the biggest mistake you could possibly make. So this is what I find so often is really stopping people, and not the fact that we will make mistakes, because we know that. It's just this overwhelming fear of making mistakes. And I think a lot of this comes down to early in life when we make a mistake when we're children. We get punished for it. We're told, that's wrong. And what we're not told is what we could do instead. We're not given a new strategy. It just kind of gets frozen in there. Oh, I made this mistake. This means I'm a bad person. I'll try to do better next time. But oftentimes parents haven't really coached their kids, at least not when I was growing up, to a way out, a route out of that. Okay, yes, I goofed up. Instead of, going on and on about how bad that is, what if, okay, you goofed up, and then, well, what's a better way to do this next time? I think now parents are kind of catching on to this, or we learn more about parenting. But often the grown adults of today did not have that. They were just told, this is wrong, this was a mistake, this was bad. Sometimes even further, parents will say, you're a bad person if you do this. And so this thing gets trapped inside of us, this pain about if I'm wrong, if I'm a bad person, if I do something wrong or I upset people. And this really becomes a barrier to becoming who we want to be and to creating the life that we want to live. Because one thing you will see in very successful people, in whatever way that you define that, they're not afraid to make mistakes. And they know that they will make mistakes. And it's fine. It's okay. Because instead of being haunted by your mistakes, your failures in life, what if that was okay? They weren't painful. Maybe frustrating at times, disappointing at times. That's all, there. But if you didn't have this extra layer of like, oh, this makes me bad, this makes me wrong, then there's nothing I can do, it's done, and we just kind of sit in regret. That's what I mean by that haunting. That haunting stays with you. And even when you're not consciously aware of it, it's still in your unconscious, dragging you down, making you think of all the possible things that could go wrong. And we just get paralyzed. We don't do anything as a result of that. So that was me. Definitely that was me like 10 years ago. And of course, when I started learning NLP, which was a little more than 10 years ago, you start learning all these tools to not only make sure or help make sure that you don't make as many mistakes going forward, but also dealing with the mistakes in the past that are dragging you down. Some, like I said, are probably most you're not even consciously aware of. So how do we deal with them if we're not consciously aware of them? That usually starts with deciding what it is you want to do, setting a goal or whatever it is, taking that first step on anything you want to do, and then you feel that resistance come up. And that resistance is probably rooted in one or more mistakes that you've made in the past. And that resistance is a warning coming up and saying, whoa, we don't want to do something that's going to cause us more problems, more pain, make us feel bad about ourselves. And so this pause, this hesitation starts to get dragged out. And then you say things to yourself like, oh, I'm just waiting for the right time, or I'm waiting to figure things out. And if you've seen my other videos, you've heard me talk a lot about this. Waiting as a reality, like waiting for a plane or a train, and then there's waiting as a mindset. And so oftentimes that waiting as a mindset comes about through this fear of making a mistake. And we're dragging around all this baggage from past mistakes, and that's not only slowing us down, but causing us to project fear and future pace possibility, everything that could possibly go wrong. And when you future pace something like that, you're actually making it so that you're more likely to make those mistakes again. For example, if I want to give a public talk and I've never done it before, or I haven't done it very much and I'm afraid of doing it, and then I think about doing it and I think about all the possible ways I could screw it up, then I start to feel anxiety. And then I start to think about this a lot and over, and I ruminate on this. And so what I'm actually doing is I'm rehearsing making mistakes. So when I get into that situation and I'm giving that public talk, I've rehearsed in my mind so much. And I've given my reference now is a movie in my head of all the possible mistakes that I can make, which makes it more likely that I will slip right into that and do that. Or I have to combat this in my mind. I have to constantly negate it while I'm trying to give a presentation. And therefore my attention is divided and I can't deliver that very well because I'm constantly fighting with myself, trying to tell myself, don't make that mistake, don't make this mistake. And just really bouncing around inside my head rather than being able to give my full attention and effort to the presentation that I'm giving. So what I'm going to give you here is a process that I use all the time with my clients. I use it all the time with myself. It's amazing how well it works. It's pretty simple. There's 7 steps to it. They're not hard or difficult at all. You can use this for any mistake you've made in the past. You can use this for any possible mistakes you fear making in the future. This also works very well if you have ruminating thoughts, whether they're thoughts about something that actually happened in your life or ruminating thoughts about something you're afraid might happen. And it just kind of spins over and over like a broken record. This will help with that as well. Not only will it help with that, it will eliminate that completely. So if you think about it, if you didn't have fear of making mistakes, now I don't mean like being psychotic here. I mean, of course you don't want to make mistakes. Of course you're going to do everything you possibly can not to make mistakes. But you're not afraid to. You know that mistakes are inevitable. What would you do differently in your life? What is your fear of making mistakes holding you back from doing? Because that's the only thing that really stops us. If we don't have a fear of making mistakes, what else would stop you? Pretty much nothing. Now, again, there's a healthy fear of, just you want to do things right, so you want to plan it, you want to set yourself up for success. But you don't have to do that rooted in fear. Maybe a little tiny bit in the back of your mind. Allowing a little bit of fear for me actually gets my adrenaline going. It makes me more alert. It makes things a little more exciting. And that's just how I function. You can find your way and find what works best for you. But I find a little bit of fear actually is useful and helpful. So it's not about trying to eliminate fear in its entirety. What this is really about is eliminating the crippling fear that is holding you back from getting started on creating the life that you want to live and being the person who you want to be. All right, so let's just go ahead and get right into this. And I will be answering questions a little bit later. So maybe hold your questions until until I'm done. So think of a past mistake. It's probably going to be the easiest way to do this. And if this is your first time, maybe not take a level 10 mistake, like the worst mistake you've ever made in your life. I wouldn't start with that one. Make this easier on yourself. So maybe just a simple mistake that you haven't forgotten, pops up in your head from time to time, and you never quite have resolved it. It's still just kind of hanging out there. So I hear people say all the time, like, oh, I've learned from my mistakes and I've moved on, and very rarely is that actually true. A lot of times these things are still hanging out, and I can explain why that is happening, because there is a reason for that. And that is that one of the things that gets lost in understanding a mistake and transforming it into something useful is we're often trying to get away from it so much that we completely forget that we actually had a positive intention in that situation. There was a positive intention there, okay? And it went unfulfilled. This is so important. This is like one of the things that NLP, Neuro Linguistic Programming, is so good at. Going to that deeper positive intention. I don't really see this in other therapy modalities, that everything comes from a positive intention. Even your mistakes, even your worst behavior. At its core, at its origin, had a positive intention, meaning you wanted to do something there was a value that you wanted to fulfill. That's what I mean by positive. Now, it could have come out in a negative way because there's definitely negative behavior. So if you get down to the core of it, you think about what it is you did. What was your positive intention behind that went unfulfilled? So a lot of times when I'm working with people and say they have a counterexample we're working with to a quality that they want to be. It could be happy, it could be successful, any of these things. And let's say we find a counterexample, and it's a counterexample meaning they were doing something that annoyed people, and then those people got angry at them, and then therefore they were unhappy or disconnected. When I ask them, like, well, what was the positive intention of what you were trying to do? And they'll often say things like, well, I wanted their attention. And I have family members like this. They want attention so bad that negative attention is better than no attention at all. And so they would do things to upset people, to get their attention, and then realize, that's not really what I wanted, though. And if we go deeper to the deeper intention, we can maybe start with they wanted attention. That was their positive intention. If you go further, a lot of times attention is connected to things like love and connection. And that's what they really wanted. It wasn't just the attention. That was what they were conscious of. They were consciously aware that they wanted attention from these people. But if you go even deeper, what they really wanted, to get their attention, but to go deeper than that, maybe to be accepted, maybe to be connected, maybe love. So we can go deeper and find that there was much more going on here than you probably realized when it came to this mistake that you made. I'll use a personal experience. At one time, this was years ago, I was out with my kids in Davenport. It's a beach not far from where I live, and there's a lot of cliffs, and it's really beautiful. And my kids were playing around, and I was taking pictures and taking some video. And there was a little valley between these two rocks where the water would rush in and the water would rush out. And my kids were getting kind of close to that. And I thought, after a while, I realized they were probably a little too close, just a little too close for comfort. And of course, I wouldn't want them to fall into that. And if they did, I don't know what I would do, because that water would come rushing in and rushing out, and it was a bunch of rocks and kind of scary looking if you think about falling into it. And I finally said, hey, guys, come back over here, move over here. So I did the right thing. But after, in retrospect, I thought I did the right thing, but too late. Or I should have been more attentive. I should have done something about this. And I started having these ruminating thoughts of one of my kids falling into that crevice and being washed out into the ocean. And this was terrifying to me. And the movie kept playing in my head over and over again. And to the point where I was starting to become rather traumatized. And this is how this often happens. We traumatize ourselves with our own thoughts, and not even something that actually happened, but something we fear could happen. And I did this enough to myself to where I started to really kind of panic and feel really bad about myself. And I thought, wait a minute. And this was pretty early in my NLP journey. I said, I have tools for this. And so I started working on applying what I'm going to show you here. And it totally went away. And it does not traumatize me anymore. And not only that, it gives me a way of understanding what I want to do in the future if I'm ever in a situation like that again. So what completely got glossed over in this situation was my positive intention. What was I doing out there? Well, I was taking in the beauty of the place, having a good time with my kids, and taking video and taking pictures. So my positive intention was really to just enjoy myself. So nothing wrong with that. So when you think of the mistake that you made, and we're oftentimes blinded by that. That's the only thing we put our attention on. Shift your attention to, what was your positive intention? Whatever that was. It doesn't have to be directly related to the mistake. It could have been something else. And sometimes when we make a mistake or something very jarring happens, like you feel like you're doing the right thing, you're going about your business, and then someone freaks out on you, and somebody starts yelling at you and saying what a terrible person you are. And this comes out of the blue because you didn't do anything specifically to harm that person, but maybe there was something that you neglected or that you did, and it wasn't really about them, but they took offense to it, and now you're kind of freaked out because they're freaking out, and you never really got back to, well, wait a minute, what was I really doing, and what was my positive intention at that time, which may or may not be related at all to whatever negative thing happened that you're thinking of as a mistake. So what was your positive intention? Important to understand this. So positive intention, and the word for positive intention is value. You were trying to fulfill a value, right? Even if you were just relaxing, or if you were at work and you were trying to get something done, what were you wanting to do? What was that positive intention? So we want to get to the level of a value. So you might say something like, well, my positive intention was to get my work done. Yes, let's go a little deeper. Okay, if you could have gotten the work done, what would that have done for you? So we want to go to a higher level. We want to go to that level of an ideal or a value. And a value is a generalization about an experience that is important to you. So they're rather vague. They're not the specific actions you were trying to do. They're what you were trying to fulfill: happiness, joy, peace, relaxation, comfort, fun, success. These are all values. So what was your positive intention? And you want to find out what that is. Because a lot of what's trapped in these painful mistakes is an unfulfilled intention, an unfulfilled value, something you were trying to do and it got blocked, it got stopped. And what was funny about this is that for the longest time when I would work on my mistakes, I would not consider whatever unfulfilled intention happened there. And after I would do a very similar process to what I'm going to give you here, I would feel like something was missing. And that's why I added in this other piece about the unfulfilled positive intention, the unfulfilled value. Then you want to ask yourself, especially if you experience regret over this mistake, you want to ask yourself, what value did you violate? This is where regret comes from. This is where feeling bad about something you did comes from. So if you think about a mistake you made, I'll use mine again. So I felt bad that I wasn't paying closer attention to my kids. And if I, had been, too caught up in taking pictures and all that, it's quite likely my kids could have slipped and fell into that crevice. Even though they were old enough to be cautious of it, they're still kids. So when I thought about this, and I thought, well, what value did I violate? And I went into, well, my responsibility as a parent, but that I want to go deeper, so what is important to me about being a responsible parent? Well, I love my kids, and in my mind, I violated that value of loving my kids, because part of loving my kids is also protecting them, watching out for them. So that's what made me feel guilty about it. I violated that very strong, very important value. So identify the value that you feel like you violated. And there might be more than one. And if it's if it's a mistake that you made that had to do with other people, it could be you violated the value of kindness, your value of compassion. That often comes up when it's a mistake that you made with people. If you were trying to succeed at something and you failed at it, maybe you violated your value. You could even say violating my value of succeeding or wanting to succeed, or of achievement. Or it could get into those higher ones like happiness and joy. So what was the value that you violated? And what's so important about understanding this and knowing what that value is, and a lot of times I've worked with people who, just by identifying this one value that they violated, they would break into tears right then and there, because they had just sort of assumed they were bad for whatever it was that they did. They never thought to consider that that bad feeling was the result of violating one of their values. And so they go, wow, okay, yeah, this is why I feel bad, because I value this value so much. And that can be so relieving and freeing, just to know that, just to even access that information. So what does that bad feeling about violating this value tell you? It's an indication of how committed you are to this value. Think about that. This is very powerful. I learned this from my mentor, Steve Andreas. You're feeling bad about something, you feeling guilty about something you did, means that you violated one of your values, and that bad feeling is an indication of how committed you are to that value. So you can feel good about feeling bad. So this is a reframe, and it gives us a lot of space once we do that. If you think about any mistake you've ever made that you felt bad about, and you go back and you find what was the value that you violated, that alone often resolves this right here and there. Now, I don't want to leave it up to chance. We want to ensure that you resolve this for good. So we don't want to stop here, but this is a very important step. And you can think about this anytime you felt bad about anything, just know that that came from violating one of your values. Well, go and find out what was that value that you violated. And once you know what that is, now you know what happened. You feel bad because you're committed to that value. That's how important that value is to you. The next step is to discover missing resources. And I'll put a parentheses around resources because it might just be one. So what do I mean by resource? Old school NLP, which still holds up very well. Old school NLP was you have a present state and you have a desired state. Present state is the state that I'm in now, which is a state of lack, that I'm not experiencing what I want to experience. Desired state is me being fulfilled, not lacking anymore, having what it is that I wanted that I didn't have before. So we base this on a goal. So I want to achieve a goal, present state. The achievement of the goal is the desired state. And the reason why we call these states is because the objects in and of themselves, or the achievements in and of themselves, do not have inherent value. They only have the value that we project onto them. So we believe we're projecting onto that. We believe that if I have that thing or I achieve that thing, then I'm going to be fulfilled. So that wouldn't work for everyone, though. So there's no inherent value in the sense that if everybody went out and achieved the same thing, they would not get the degree of fulfillment. It wouldn't all be the same from person to person. It would be different from person to person. So what I'm doing is I'm projecting onto this future achievement or material possession that I acquire, believing that when I have that thing, then I'm going to be fulfilled. But it's really about the desired state, not about the object or the achievement. And in old school NLP, it was the only thing that's different between a present state and a desired state, meaning a state of lack versus a state of fulfillment, is accessing the right resources from within you. So resources, interestingly enough, share a lot of the same names as values do. So joy, peace, happiness, kindness, compassion, humor, comfort, all of these things can be considered internal resources. When we make a mistake, we can comfortably assume that your positive intention went unfulfilled. And we can comfortably assume that you violated one of your values. So now that we know that, and you think back to this situation all over again, then you ask yourself, well, what resource or resources was I not accessing within myself that had I accessed, I would have been able to fulfill my positive intention? Not only that, I would have been able to fulfill my positive intention and, of course, not violate any values. And that not necessarily being dependent on anything anyone else did. Meaning, the situation, the people might have responded to me the same way. I still might have failed at the thing that I was going after. But because I'm accessing the right resources, I remain fulfilled. So in old school NLP, what they discovered is, okay, if I know the present state and I know the desired state and I can identify the missing resources, Well, if I access those resources now and put myself into the desired state, which is a resourceful state, then it becomes much easier for me to achieve what I want. If you think about it, are you going to achieve what you want coming from a place of lacking resources, not accessing resources, or are you going to achieve what you want much faster if you're accessing all of your resources? You're resourceful. You know the answer to that. Of course, you're going to be, you're going to succeed much faster, much better, and enjoy it much more if you're already resourceful. So that's how old school NLP would work. I have my present state, I have my desired state, identify the missing resources, access those resources, and now develop a strategy, uh, a successful strategy from a resourceful state. And then now go take action from a resourceful state to go and achieve what it is that I want. So that's what we're looking for here. What were the resources that you were not accessing? Now, to give you an even better understanding of what I mean by resources, what would be a state of resourcelessness, meaning a state where you have zero access to your resources? That's what we call panic. And this is why they say, in a crisis, never panic. And that's what most people do. And before I understood that, well, let me tell you how I came to understand that, was there's this thing that we can do called cloaking. And you're taking your internal experiences, your internal representations, and you cloak them like as if they don't exist. So I did this practice. I wanted to know what it would be like if I started cloaking all of my resources so that I would experience what it was like to not have access to any resources. I didn't know what was going to happen. This was an experiment. As I started to do that, I had to stop because I started to go into a state of panic. So what comes first? The loss of resources and then panic? Or does panic induce a state of resourcelessness? I don't know. That's that whole chicken and egg argument. It might go both ways. So if panic is an example of a resourceless state or the ultimate resourceless state, what is the ultimate resourceful state? That's a state of flow. When you're in flow, you are accessing whatever resource you need at the moment. And so we don't access all of our resources all at once. That would not be necessary. But in the moment, in the context, whatever it is that we're doing, based on our behavior, our interactions, whatever it is that we're doing, when we're in flow, that means we're easily accessing any and all resources we need as we need it. That's what flow feels like. So now you have a better understanding of what I mean by resources. So once you know the value that you violated, and you know the value that you intended to fulfill, what resources were you not accessing that made that happen that way? In other words, what resources would you have needed to access to fulfill your positive intention and to not violate this value? It could have been more attentiveness. It could have been, for me, that's in my situation with my kids, it would have been more attentiveness, paying more attention, feeling more connected. Connection is a resource. If I had been more connected with my kids rather than what I was seeing around me, I would have caught this sooner. So you want to find what these resources are. It might be more than one. You probably don't need more than three. Sometimes people just keep listing resource after resource, and it's like we're only really accessing around 2 to 3 resources at one time. Maybe you go up to 5 resources, but don't spend so much time on this step that you have like a list of 20 resources. That's just not how this works. It doesn't need to work that way. Okay, so now that we have all this information, what do we do with it? We're going to make a new movie. Now, some people say, well, I'm not that visual. You don't need to be. You can make adjustments to do this auditorily, or you can add auditory to the visuals if you're very auditory and you need to process through the auditory channel. But more than likely, if you made a mistake and you feel bad about that mistake, you see something. You see an image, you see a movie, it might be a still image, something, a visual reference of what happened. The good thing about the visual modality, and even if you're very auditory, very kinesthetic, any of those things, we all visualize, we all use the visual modality. Some people use it more than others, or some people use it more to process than others. If you are not, if you don't have a preference for the visual modality, I would recommend that you still cultivate that ability more. Why? Because when it comes to the visual modality, you can access more information simultaneously than you can with any other modality. For example, if I go to a museum and I see a painting, when you look at a painting, you're through sight, you can access every single color on that painting, and it might be 20 colors, but you can access that simultaneously. Now imagine auditorily, if you were listening to 20 people speak at one time, you're not going to understand anybody unless you focus in on one person, right? So you can't take in all of that simultaneous information auditorily and understand it and make sense of it, or for it to be useful to you. And the same thing with kinesthetic touch, kinesthetic perceptual. Like if you were having, I don't know, 5 sensations on your body, you would kind of get distracted, and you'd have to really focus in on one to know which one, what's actually happening. So again, the visual modality creates simultaneous information, brings it all together. That's what makes it so powerful. So you're going to make a new movie. So you're starting with the old movie, what actually happened. And you're going to make a new movie where you're conscious of your positive intention, right? Your deeper positive intention, not, oh, I just want attention. No, I want love and connection. Like those are the deeper intentions. You're aware of the value that you violated, so you're going to stay away from violating that value. And now you're going to plug in those missing resources. So recreate the movie of what happened, guided by your positive intention of what you wanted to fulfill at that time, while plugging in those missing resources. And just allow your mind to show you that movie. This is not something like some people get, when I explain this, they kind of get tense and are like, oh, they're trying to create the movie. No, no, no. You don't need to try to create the movie. You know what happened. Start there. You know what your positive intention was. And you know the resources you need to plug in. So just do that and see what movie that creates for you. Your mind will create that movie. What does it look like when you see yourself fulfilling your positive intention while accessing all of the resources necessary to do that? What do you see? And once you have that, you want to check for congruence. Some people call this an ecology check. I refer to it as congruence. Or when this new movie you see in front of you, is that who you wish you had been, or is that what you wish you had done? And we can start to future pace this and check in. Is this how you would want to deal with a future situation if you're ever in a future situation that's similar to this? Is this how you would want to do this? If not, you just make adjustments. Just keep making adjustments until it is, where the movie you're seeing in front of you is like, yes, this is exactly what I wish I had done. And I can see that I'm resourceful and that I'm fulfilled. Or you go, no, something's not quite right, or there's some part of me that's objecting to this. Then okay, listen to the objection, listen to the resistance, and you can even just ask it, well, what needs to be different about this movie for this to work for me, for this to be a vision of how I want to do this going forward so that I don't make this mistake again. So you might have to make some of those adjustments. You don't want to leave any resistance or objections hanging out there, because if you do, it'll break this. If there's unaddressed objections coming up from within, likely this process will not take. It will not hold. And this is a common thing that we hear. My coaches and I hear when they say, okay, is this going to last? Or like whatever the change is this going to last? And we need to check in. Was there any objection to that? Is any part of you objecting to that, resisting this change? If so, we need to address it. If not, it's going to stay this way. The change will take. It will hold indefinitely. So very important to get the congruence check. Make sure there's no objections. If there are, you make adjustments. Another way to really check that this is congruent is to future pace this. Okay, if I'm in a similar situation like this again in the future, is this the way I want to handle this? If yes, great. If not, okay, need to make some more adjustments. So this past mistake actually gets transformed into a vision of how you want to do better, how you want to not just do better, but do extremely well, not commit the mistake again, but to really take yourself to the place you wanted to go all along. And this is what we need to correct mistakes is we need references, and in this case we're creating a movie as a reference. We need references for how we want to do this differently. When I became a parent, I remember thinking of all the things I wanted to do differently than my parents, that I wanted to raise my kids better than the way that I was raised. So I thought about all the things I did not want to do and all the different things that I wanted to do different than my parents. And then it amazed me when I started getting into the middle, when I was in the middle of it, of parenting, how much I started parenting like my parents. And even the exact words that my parents used to say were coming out of my mouth. Now, at the time, I didn't understand this. After studying NLP, now I do. Because before I was a parent, I had no reference experience of my own as a parent. All I had was my parents. That was my reference experience from my perspective, of course. But when you're in that situation, in a new situation, your mind is going to reach for the closest possible reference you have in order to figure out how to navigate that situation. So in my case, I gravitated to how my parents did things. That was my closest reference, even though it wasn't me. And then I realized I had to then intervene and change things and do it differently. I had to make a very conscious attempt to change this because we just naturally resort to reference experience. And this is why people commit the same mistakes over and over again, because now they have a reference for it. It feels comfortable. They don't know anything different. They haven't thought this through like you're doing right now. So they just keep falling on the old reference and committing the same old mistakes. If you intervene like we're doing here, and you're finding out what was really meaningful to you here, what meaning did you violate that was important to you, what resources did you need, and then create a movie based on all of that, now you have a reference experience that is more powerful than what actually happened. Because now this is based in your values, which is where your motivation lies. So now we have this really nice, wonderful movie. You're completely congruent with it. You can even tune it up. You can make it bigger, brighter, whatever makes the movie feel more compelling, that makes you feel more motivated to be that person. Now, really important that you stay disassociated. There's associated and disassociated. So associated is when you relive a memory, point of view perspective. It's not what we want to do here. First of all, when we're dealing with a mistake, and I probably should have mentioned this at the very beginning, when we're dealing with a mistake, it's much easier to deal with that if we disassociate. If you're associated and you're reliving the mistake all over again, it can be rather traumatizing. We don't want to do that. So you disassociate, meaning you see yourself doing what it was that you considered a mistake. So once you can see yourself doing that, and you have a bit of it's a little one step removed, it's much easier to deal with. It's much easier to go through these steps and do each one of them when you're disassociated. Once you recreate the new movie, now a lot of people would say, well, don't I want to associate into that? No, you don't. If you want to just check it out, meaning you want to step into it to get a feel for what it's like, and maybe you can gather more information that way, that's fine. But when you're done, you always want to step out, and you always want to be disassociated for something that you want to do, meaning that you want to be motivated to move toward. And so when you have this movie in your mind, and then it's a movie of you doing what you want to do, fulfilling your positive intentions, handling something resourcefully, that movie becomes motivation for you to be that person. But if you associate, that motivation diminishes because it feels like you're already there and you already have it, which is not the truth. You don't already have it. You haven't already done it. So stay disassociated so that this motivates you to continue to move in the direction of being this person who follows his or her intention, fulfills that intention, and does so resourcefully. Very important. So you tune up that movie, and it's compelling, it's motivating, and then you take the old movie. I can go back and forth from writing in cursive. I should probably not do that. Okay. So we tune up the movie and attach the old movie. Before you do that, though, so we don't want to we're not trying to deceive you into believing something happened that did not happen. So that's not what we're trying to do. We're not trying to rewrite history and deceive you, or you're not trying to delude yourself. That's not good. You might still need the information from the old movie, especially if it involves someone else, and they might say, hey, remember that time? And you go, nope, that didn't happen. That's not what we're after. So we want to take the old movie of what actually happened, and we want to shrink it down, make it dark, make it gray or faded, whatever makes it de-emphasized. And we want to attach it to the new movie. So it'll look something like, here's your new movie, big, bright, compelling, right? And you want to take I'll put a new, you want to take the old movie and you want to make it dark and small and attach it at the edge of the new movie. Now, does it need to be exactly right here? No, it could be here, it could be here, it could be here, it could be in the corner. And the reason for this, the reason why we want it attached, and you want it attached, like at the edges. If that doesn't work for you, you can always, like here's the old movie, you can put an arrow to it. You could tie a rope to it, whatever works for you. And the reason for this is if your mind ever falls on this old painful memory ever again, it's immediately compelled toward this new movie. So if you think about it, if they're attached and your mind falls on this old movie, well, attached to it is this new, big, bright, compelling movie. So your mind's going to immediately shift to that because our mind, our eyes, our attention, our senses are compelled by things that are big, that are bright, that are compelling, right? So your mind's going to go to that. And so when I did this for that experience that I had with my kids, every time that memory would pop back into my head, it would immediately shift to seeing myself doing what I wanted to do, fulfilling my positive intention and doing so resourcefully. And so that new movie became a new reference for going forward. So this is what I mean by earlier when I was saying, like, when we're kids, we do something wrong and a teacher or a parent comes to us and says, that was wrong, that was bad. We take this on ourselves, oh, that's wrong, that's bad. And we're often not given a way out. We're not given, well, what would have been better to do, right? So this is how we're doing that. And we're not just doing it by, oh, what would have been nicer to have happened. We're not doing that. We're connecting this to what was your original positive intention. We're also bringing awareness to the value that you violated. And then we're adding in the necessary resources to fulfill that intention and avoid violating your values. So this juices this up so much more than just being like, yeah, I shouldn't have done that. I should have done this other thing. That doesn't take hold usually. That doesn't stick. And this is what I mean by most people will say, I've learned from my mistakes and I've moved on, and they really haven't. And often their mistakes continue to plague them, continue to haunt them, continue to hold them back from doing things that they want to do. All right, so if you like this stuff, which I do, I love this stuff, we have probably the least expensive NLP practitioner training out there. And when I say least expensive, I do not mean that it is, what's the word I'm looking for? That it doesn't have everything that an NLP practitioner training should have. It has everything and more. And in fact, the reason why I created this training was because I was realizing more and more as I did more training and talked to a lot of the trainers who were there from the early days, that we weren't getting the whole story. That I took 3 practitioner trainings with 3 different teachers, and they were all different, and there always seemed like there were pieces that were missing. And so I decided I wanted to do a practitioner training, and it's a practitioner training based on a 24-day live training. The material that I used is Stephen Connie Ray's, Andreas's material, with their permission, of course. And it is the most complete NLP practitioner training I'm aware of. And it's so inexpensive. And you also get a community of coaches and practitioners and coaches who are holding practice sessions. Like, this is the best possible way that I can think of to learn NLP from your home and to have people to practice with, which you can do virtually, on Zoom. So you want to master this stuff. You want to become really good at this. And I can't think of better life skills than NLP skills. Check the description below this video, and you'll see there's a place where you can enroll in this training and get instant access to the videos and to the community. And you can ask questions in the community. Not only will my coaches answer, I'm active in there too. I will answer your questions as well. So just getting these things down, it's amazing how much just having these good processes and techniques to use, how quickly it advances your life, how quickly you let go of painful things and get on with your life, creating what you want to create, becoming the person you want to become. When you have the tools to do it, it's so much easier. And my mentor used to say, something is only difficult until you know how to do it. And that's just it. These things don't have to be difficult. When you know how to do them, transform them, do something better, or alleviate, pain or whatever, it's not that difficult. It's amazing how simple it can be. All right, let me check to see if there's any questions. Tim says, makes him think of a quote, "I may make mistakes, but my mistakes don't make me." Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of people do define themselves by the mistakes that they make, and you don't have to do that. That's not necessary. See, Adolfo says, "This is exactly what Brant, my self-concept trading coach, guided me through yesterday. Today, my new movie played out exactly as we practiced. No fear of loss, just flawless executions." Awesome. Isn't that great? Isn't that, it works so incredibly well. It's so simple, and it comes right out. I remember testing it, and I've done this with so many mistakes that I've made in the past. I've done this with so many things that, like I said, it didn't even happen, but I had ruminating thoughts and fears and anxieties about something happening, and I just do this process, and it's gone. And I'll even notice sometimes my mind will fall on that old thought or that old movie, and then there it is. There's the new movie showing me exactly what to do, how to do it. And that's what we need. Otherwise we get stuck in the pain. We get stuck in the limitation of, oh, I wish I hadn't done this. That's not going to get you there, and it's just going to hold you back. And every time you have one of those mistakes, you feel that weight that it holds you back. And by the time you reach say 40 years old, you've been carrying so many of these mistakes around that the possibilities of doing the things that you want to do, you don't even feel like that's possible anymore, and you're so afraid of making another mistake. Well, once you have this, you're not afraid anymore. You just know that mistakes are part of life. That's just what happens. So truly learn from them and truly move on from them. That's what this process will do for you. Okay. Well, I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did, and I would love to hear how this has worked for you. And this stays up, even though we're live right now, this will stay up as a recording. So even if you're not watching this live, do this process and then let me know in the comments what happened. How did this work for you? An ultimate life hack, yeah. And there's so many of them. There's so many of them in NLP, which is just awesome. There's just so many tools for every problem, and not just problems, but tools for tapping into your potential and creating exactly what it is that you want. All right, take care, everyone.